Welcome to the Scent of Beauty. My name is Susan, and this video is titled, It Could Be Worse. Superlative to what? Part 2. If you haven't listened to the first video, part 1, I suggest you pause this video, listen to part 1, and come back. But the question is superlative to what? We know that bad, worse, worse, right? So if it could be worse, it's safe to say we've bypassed bad. We're in the trenches of worse. And there is solace that we're not at the final stage of worse. But is it a comfortable place, and is it a place that I have to ask myself, or an individual could examine themselves and say, is that a place that I need to camp out in? Is it a resting place, a peaceful place, a place that I could thrive? Is it a place that at the core creates champions? It could be worse. I find it's a blanket statement, and are blanket statements covering the entire being, or from the top of the head to the neck? Is it just a blanket statement to comfort ourselves? In the first video, I asked the question, is it this statement a short solace of subsistence? And that means like to support myself, especially at a minimal level, to just cope and to endure. It could be worse. Just hang on in there. But hanging on in there, it's in the worst, because bad, worse, worst. I think about an indiscriminate statement like an actual blanket. It doesn't always spread over the entire being. Have you ever, or I know I have, I have had a cover that is short in length. And so the upper or lower torso could be exposed, and it becomes a stretch struggle with the blanket, like the blanket statement. It could be worse as a judgment call based on a belief, and we try to stretch it from our head, to our toes. But in these videos, I want us to see that our bodies have an entirely different message, modem of operation. And so the blanket statement might not be referring to what we're feeling in our bodies. Every now and then we can catch a glimpse of an impulsive bodily act that we didn't even think of, if we're in tune and conscious with ourselves, about ourselves. Or we could even see it and observe others, how their bodies are reacting without them having any consciousness of what they're doing, their movements. And it's interesting to observe this mode of operation, modus operandi, habits of working. And I know that this is usually used by police investigators, a way of profiling, or the method that a criminal used to commit a crime. Simply, it's just a way to take a look at the psyche clues. As I became more conscious of my body and just monitoring it without thinking, I remember closing my eyes when I'm getting into, just checking in with myself. I closed my eyes as a method of becoming in tune. my hands automatically clap together, softly together, in a form of like the praying hands, because my eyes was closed and I was relaxed. And that praying hand gesture is the psychological response to my body. I wasn't going to pray. I didn't have the intention of praying. And I've watched over time just various body movements, like twisting of hands as a reference to what's next. Not thinking those words, but the psyche of the body, the uncontrollable shaking legs. I've seen others like just shaking, and hands to the face contact, like the palm of the hands covering the face. The statement of, oh my gosh, without saying those words. The pacing. There are so many different ways the body is expressing that it doesn't feel the way we're thinking. Our bodies could be sending us messages of how it's releasing these anxieties. But the statement is, it could be worse. Have you ever listened to steps, like heavy steps, boom, boom, boom? Someone's just walking. They're talking at a normal indoors voice, but they walk heavy. Their steps are so literally stomping without their knowledge. Slamming something on a table instead of placing the item down quietly. These are just behaviors that we automatically do. But why? I want to mention in this video, like I did the first video, that we are visceral beings on a deep level, visceral feelings, and it's defined, I should say, in Collins' dictionary, feelings that you feel very deeply and find it difficult to control or ignore, and that are not the result of thoughts. And visceral feelings could come from a removed experience, something that we have seen, something we have heard and experienced. So I could say it could be worse. The experience that I minimize, my body could be maximally telling me it feels different than my blanket statement. Electrical charges builds up from a cycle of belief, at least in the body. It could be worse, and allowing the crushes to be constant. And when I say crush, we could be crushed over someone's word. We could crush someone with what we say, how we respond. And so I could say, or an individual could say, it could be worse. But when we're crushed, our bodies feel it at a visceral feelings. And by the time the message gets to our spinal cord, we could have already determined mentally that it could be worse, and we shrug that feeling off, and we don't allow that message from our body to become a part of the determination. Defining the moment without all the information. Again, defining a moment without all the information, with all of our input, our minds and our bodies. I want to say Martha Nussbaum. I mentioned her. She's a philosopher, by the way. And in her book titled Upheaval of Thoughts, Intelligence of Emotion, she made such a profound statement. I want to say it here again, that emotions are not just the fuel that powers the psychological mechanism of a reasoning creature. They are parts, highly complex and messy parts of this creature's reasoning itself. But the emotions and the intellect are just two parts of our creatively trifecta of experience. The third, which can be disentwined from the other two, and which is in constant dynamic dialogue with them, the physical reality of the body, the physical reality of the body. What is the reality my body and your body, our body, is experiencing? It could be worse. There is a dismissive tone that is heard. Fortune at this level of being of misfortune, finding that. And misfortunes should not, at least for me, to maintain our sense of beauty, misfortunes can't be dismissed. We can't it shouldn't be bypassed, like, oh, the bad, bypass the bad, experiencing the worst of the misfortune, but because we're not at the worst of it, it's almost giving in while our body is letting out. I thought of a homunculus being, you know, that I think it's 16th century, that little person. It's a fully mature human being, but they have like these huge hands, but the rest of their body parts are so small. And those are the feelings for me. That's how I picture it, like being a humongous person, microscope, very small, but fully developed human. Could the immaturity be in our bodies where the messages in our bodies haven't been able to develop and mature and become fully formed and expresses itself loud enough for us to hear it? Someone once asked me, where do I get my inspiration as far as my videos? And it's the random, it's random at the right time, I would say. I think that, I think it's just things that stop me in my track and get my attention. If I had to sum up where I get my inspiration in one word, it's the epiphanies, right, that I get. The moment a sudden and striking realization occur, a revealing sense. I get like these euphoria of like a courting kind, like when someone is courting another person. And what I mean by that, it's like it's dazzling my mind initially. At least that's what happened initially, just enough to draw me into, it's almost like an abyss where I obsessively follow and see where it's taking me. Like it could be worse. Like that was an epiphany. it got my attention, but it was coupled with curiosity. So the inspiration I receive never comes like roaring. They come with just enough sound for me to respond with a it could be worse. That's what occurred. And an introspect awakening to a specific subject matter. That's how I get my inspiration. And I keep looking into it. So I put thoughts and become pensive. I become that. And I ruminate. And I look for inner direction. Where are we going? I had such an experience when this statement, I heard someone say it, was spoken, and I quote, "It could be worse." I said, in that moment. It wasn't the first time I heard that statement. Actually, it wasn't the first time I heard it, but it was the first time it piqued my interest. It could be worse. Is that the evolutionary bar? That was my next thought. Is that a hip hip hooray cheer? A proud hail? Or not letting the worst worsen? It could be worse. Is that a group consensus? Is it a lofty loser stance? And when I say loser, not in human beings are not losers. You know, we have our sense of beauty, we have our pheromones, but the mentality, the belief, it could be worse. Is it in regards to a game, a sport? Losing by 1 point, is that it could be worse if it's 1 point and not a blowout? Does it mean that do we feel victorious in bad, in worse? It's a great place to stop and ponder these questions. I do. Welcome to the Scent of Beauty. This is part 2 of It Could Be Worse. Superlative to what? Thank you.